then let's record. Thank you, Deborah. So you probably saw the event, sadly said. Also, if you're willing and able, please turn on your camera because it allows me to read the group better and get a sense of, whether things are landing on you and how they are landing on you. Otherwise, I might just see myself talking more than we want me to. And I like to avoid that situation. You probably saw the event today, says like sadly or forlornly last session. It is the third in a series that was originally to be four, but I have scheduling conflicts and me and y'all schedule were not matching up because end of the year, and so we chose to make this third one the last one. And the topic is feedback cycles and evaluation. And before actually diving in, I'd like to ask if anyone can give, somewhat of a summary or whatever you remembered or took away, or any learning or any highlight from either of the two last sessions. If someone was there at both of them, maybe you can give a more synthesized summary.
Could you remind us of the topic from last time?
The topic from the first time, so if today is the third one, the topic from the first time was like, an overall introduction, of like why organizations, what's up with the collective decision making, what is self-managed, and sort of that background to say sociocracy one specific way to self-manage collective decision making. And that was the overview of sociocracy and the design principles. And then session 2 was on circle structures. And we basically looked at a lot of different drawings of circle structures and eventually YPCs. Yeah, does that help? Does anyone else want to add bits, memorable times, things you took away? Carlene, yeah, please.
One thing that I remembered from the very first governance training that helped shape my idea around sociocracy was actually what sociocracy was, how it's a combination of like kind of hierarchical practices as well as egalitarian practices in order to combine both efficiency and making sure that everyone has an equal say in like organization affairs. And then also from the second governance training, I learned like what delegates would be used for and how all the circles will look together like under one bigger circle, which would be like the overall, I forgot what it's called. I'm blanking right now, but the bigger circle and then the mission circle and how those all work together.
Yes. The general circle and the mission circle, correct?
Yes, that was it.
I think you touched on every single one of the points that I wanted to bring back from last time. Deborah, would you mind sharing the slideshow? And I can put a link to the slideshow in the minutes if, Deborah, you're willing to screen share. Oh, Deborah, you're 2 steps ahead. You asked me like 2 weeks ago on the chat if I needed support on screen sharing. Yes, please. And would you go to the next slide after this one? Which is overview from last time. Can you click? Yes. The main idea that I remember from the first time was the 2 energies that I speak of in self-management that I think are exactly the ones that Carlene was mentioning, like effectiveness or getting things done or meeting needs or forward motion. And on the other side, equivalence or hearing everybody's voice and nobody being ignored and more like represented by sitting together in a circle, like the togetherness of our forward walking. It's like walking, but walking together, being together, but continuing to move forward. And then the other ones are specific to the second session on circle structure, which, as Carlene said, talked about double linking, which are the leads and delegates that connect circles to subcircles so that information can flow both ways. Does anybody else have anything they want to add from the last sessions? Either questions, memorable times, things that you took away, doubts you left sitting on? All right. If there are none, then I'm gonna invite us to do, Right. And then the last one, we also talked about operational roles. Sorry about that, which are, we said, are a circle of one, basically, right? Insofar as, it's a defined bundle or set of tasks, activities, etc., that that person, in the case of a role, or those people in the case of a circle, have authority to decide on. And now can we go to the next slide? This one is an exercise which involves moving our bodies around a little bit. So if you're willing and able, please do. If you're not, then of course, please don't. But if nothing impedes you, then please, I encourage you to play along with it. And basically, I'm gonna ask us to try standing on one leg, just one, if you can stand up. Also use it to stretch, because we probably need it. And try it for a minute. And then try doing it, if you're already found, some level of stability, try doing it with your eyes closed. And then if it was hard to do it on one foot, maybe try it with other foot, see with which one it's easier. And if you found stability with your eyes closed, then go ahead and open them again. And if you feel like you manage stability, try doing it barefoot. Try taking your, whatever shoe wear you're wearing, if you're wearing any, and try doing it barefoot. Or if you were already barefoot like myself, then try to do it with shoes on, which fortunately enough I have them here. Otherwise I'd have to run and get them. Try and see the difference between doing it with or without shoes. Or even if you don't have a shoe, try doing it on top of something, like maybe not a chair so you don't hurt yourself, but like a cushion or something that you have laying around that you can step on, that's okay. Piece of wool, towel, cloth. And unless you feel like you're really close to reaching stability and you still, you want to try it until it happens, then I invite you to come back. And if you want to sit back down or come to, whatever the neutral posture was, so that we can reflect a little bit on the exercise. And basically the question is, how was it? How were the experiences different from each other? The shoes on or shoes off, eyes closed or eyes open? Michael, how was it?
So it was vulnerable because try to do it. You're like, oh, wait, I can't do this. And now I can't do this in front of you all. So I was like, but okay, trust it, right? Don't worry, just focus on the task. And then I got it. And I didn't think it would be harder when I closed my eyes. But for some reason, when I stopped staring at you in the computer, I was like, oh, why is it a bit more difficult with my eyes closed? And then I started wondering. So I had a moment of vulnerability, then a moment of wondering, excuse me.
Nice. So for anyone, and if you don't want to unmute yourself, please feel free to put in the chat. Was any which of the different modes, so to speak, clearly easier or harder than other ones? And if so, why do you think that is? I'm honestly curious about the shoe one, because this is the first time I tried the shoe one.
I didn't wear shoes. We don't wear shoes indoors. But I did stand on a cushion, and that was much harder than standing on the ground because it was slipping and sliding and my eyes were closed. It was just not comfortable. But a challenge. Maybe another way to think about it is it's fun challenge.
Right. So I think the pattern for me, at least, is eyes closed and doing it on top of something like a cushion or even a mat or, something that is in direct contact with the floor makes it more challenging. Does anybody have a, hard take of like, this is why that is?
I think for me, it was more difficult with the eyes closed because there's a psychological thing, I think, around trust and like anchoring and field perspective. I'm sure there's a whole bunch of different things, but there was something to that I had to center myself in the vision when I stopped looking at the screen or looking at others try it.
Cool. Yeah, the answer's kind of silly because, I mean, the question's kind of silly because the answer is kind of obvious, but when we have our eyes closed, we have way less information than with our eyes open. And when you have them open, you have so many frames for reference that aren't just your body feeling, that also inform your balance of where things are. And makes a difference. That's why they say, you know, if you center your sight on one specific point, it's easier to reach stability than if you're just, you know, like, I don't know, staring at different parts of your body or moving it around. And my theory is that the thing with a shoe, like if the more direct your contact with the surface that you're standing on is, the less, like the more directly the information is traveling. Whereas if you're doing it on top of a cushion, you're getting the information through the cushion, like between your foot and the actual surface. And so you're getting only some of it. And I recognize that the exercise is somewhat kind of abstract, but information at that basic level operates the same way in organizations. If we want to get, you know, the most useful feedback or piece of information or the most informed decisions, we want to go straight to the source, right? To the places where the work is happening and with the people who are doing the day-to-day job and operations. They're the most informed to make the decisions, right? And that's basically the idea of circles and self-management, to have the most equipped and informed people make the decisions. But also the part about the eyes, maybe I should change the exercise, right? If we did it blinking really fast, it would be easier than with your eyes closed, but it would be harder than just with your eyes open, right? So the idea is you're constantly getting the information. If you do it blinking, it's sort of interrupted or it's intermediated. And so the idea is to get the feedback as often as possible. The alternative example, if we want to work with our imaginations instead of our body, is if when you're riding a bike or driving a car or even playing Mario Kart or whatever, the act of steering is rarely ever steering really hard to change directions. It's way more stable and, you know, short adjustments along the way than a few really rough changes of direction. But oh well, that's enough of the exercise. We can do that, get a little less abstract and talk more about organizations. I wanted to ask a question, and it is maybe put in the chat. What are all the different, well, that was sort of the intro to the topic, which is feedback. Feedback understood as information flowing to and from. What are some of the main feedback or evaluation mechanisms, practice patterns used in sociocracy or in your organization currently, if not specific to sociocracy? Feel free to put them in the chat or just unmute yourself and share some. Carlene, I see we use the process of consent. Do you want to share more?
Sure. So I know that, for example, when we're looking to nominate a new lead of the circle, we would use a process of consent. So we would go around, the person who's interested in the position will basically say why they're interested, and then it'll be like a round for like questions or maybe like comment, and then we'll all have a round of consent. So whether or not we consent for that person holding that position. So that's just one way that we kind of make sure everyone has a voice using in sociocracy.
Right. Another way to put the same thing is that For the facilitator, doing a consent round is getting feedback from the group on whether this is, okay to move forward, or whether it needs, whether the proposal needs some adjustment, right? An objection is not saying no, it's saying actually, the proposal is missing this. So it's also a way of collecting feedback. Deborah, would you click next a few times? And I can show some of the ones that I have, and maybe those will prompt. But for example, check-ins and checkouts, I see them as a way of getting feedback, right? We're checking in with ourselves. We're saying how we're doing. We're, in a way, in the check-in, we're already doing an evaluation of how we're coming in as individuals and showing up to the group before we even start, right? If somebody says, I'm having a totally bad day because my, pet just passed away or something like that, then we're getting the information super quick of like, maybe it's not a good idea to move forward with the meeting today, like maybe, let's sit this one out. Same thing with checkouts at the end. We're saying how we're doing, but also how the meeting met our needs, how we, how it was for us, how we experienced it. Then admin part, which is the beginning of our meeting, when we check, very basic things like, do we have everyone in attendance? How long are we going for? Did we check the minutes from last time? That's also a little bit of collecting, like, do we have everything we need in order to get started? Term ends, every good decision comes with a term end, basically, for when it's going to get reviewed. It works both for roles and policy. Any other ones to add before I continue with my list? Performance reviews are a specific time, when a term ends, we usually have a review how someone performed in that role. And we can talk more specifically about what that looks in the future. Another one. And then specifically in facilitation, I think it's the facilitator's job, right? We can conceptualize the facilitator as making operational unilateral decisions on a group process. But in order to inform those, it's their job to get, the group's input through rounds. The classic example is like, oh, I don't know what to do with this agenda item. Let's do a round on what we're going to do. And you do a round on how we should move forward. But there's other ones that are a little less meta. Could you click the next one, please, Deborah? Which I call understand, explore, decide, and it'll be part of the main things that we focus on today. So I won't take time to go much about it. And then what I said of checking in with the group before moving forward. It's making sure we're moving forward, but making sure we're doing it together, making sure we're, feeling in togetherness or in community, but continuing to move forward or do that which we set ourselves up to do. Would you go to the next slide, please, Deborah?
May I ask add one more feedback thing that I just realized?
Yeah.
I think the way the circles interlock to a general circle where people across external comms and advocacy and outreach partnerships can collaborate is also a way to give feedback, because we all need to make sure that we're coordinated even as we're in these separate groups, working on different parts of the overall body.
Cool. Thank you. And so this is basically the main idea of today. And that is that feedback cycles, at least in sociocracy, are usually divided into 3-step processes that we call lead, do, measure. Lead is basically making a plan. Doing is executing that plan. Measuring is assessing, okay, how much did the doing match the plan? How much did it meet the needs that it was supposed to meet? And that way, what we're assessing is not just how successful was it, but since it's a cycle, right? Every measure part, every evaluation would also inform the next planning phase. So with a case of a policy, with a decision, we put a term on it. And when we revise it, we don't just revise retroactively, but we're also thinking, okay, based on this revision, what changes can we make to it? And the idea is basically we improve with these cycles over time. And like I said, doing them more often and in smaller scales allows us to fail easily and to, steer steadily across time rather than change directions drastically every so often. It is a very broad common pattern, and that's why I like it, because it can be used for a number of things. Like it's really just dividing things into steps of three, right? As if you could say with storytelling, stories have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And there's no real, rational saying behind that other than just that it feels good. It feels comfortable to know, like, oh, this is the plan. Okay, let's execute it. Okay, how did it go? There's just something cozy about the pattern being divided into three. So can we go to the next slide, please? Does anybody know or remember what fractality is, as we talked about it last time in circle structures? Oh, hi, Selena. Welcome, by the way. Do you want to say a word of how you're doing? We've only really gotten started.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Hi everyone, my name is Selena. I'm a 10th grader in high school, and I was invited here by Deborah because I wanted to become more involved. So thank you for having me.
Thanks. So fractality, as I defined it last time with the slide that you see on the top right of the circles and the subcircles, and how they are like infinitely, they could get, the darker ones could get darker and darker and smaller and smaller and smaller infinitely, is basically the idea of self-similarity, which sounds kind of funny, but it's when patterns replicate themselves and when you zoom in and it looks virtually the same as it does when you zoom out. And so the idea is that when the three-step cycle is applied to facilitation, it takes the name or the form of understand, explore, decide, and that each one of those phases can be divided into another three-step phase that also composed of understand, explore, decide. And I'll give some examples to clarify what I mean. Can we go to the next one, please? So in that slide, you see the traditional sociocratic meaning format, and you can already see that it's divided in three blocks. An opening, a content or body, and lastly, a closing. And the opening, as we said, is also a form of feedback, and it contains the admin phase, which is also can be seen as a form of feedback or evaluation. But then the body, the main content, the agenda, it has that understand, explore, decide part. Can you go to the next one, please, Deborah? And the idea of the three steps of understand, explore, decide, an agenda item, is that they contain each other. So in order to explore a topic, you have to understand, like, what's the question, right? And in order to make a decision, you have to understand it, to have explored some possibilities, and then to say, like, yes, I think this is the way the group should go. More specifically in meeting context, an agenda item, when it's an understanding, we usually say it's a report. You're just sharing a bit of information. You just want the group to know, maybe ask some questions if there's time to it, but it doesn't have to, trigger a conversation or discussion. It's just sharing the information and making sure there's a shared understanding. In the case of exploring an issue, maybe, okay, you share, you report, you explain, we make sure everybody understood, and then we take some time, like, okay, what are some possible solutions to this? Or what does it imply for the circle? What does it imply for the organization? How are we feeling about it? What are our opinions? Like the exploration really it's so open-ended that there's infinite number of prompt questions to sort of trigger that phase and to tap into group intelligence or group creativity. And lastly, the making the decision is after having understood, after having explored, the consent process that I think most of y'all are familiar with. And in case you're not, we will cover in some of today's session. But basically, getting to the point where there's a proposal on the table and the circle consent saying, yes, let's enact this. Can we go to the next one, please? That's basically the same information. Maybe I'll just add that it's useful not just for the facilitator in knowing, okay, how far do I take this agenda item, or what's the desired outcome of the agenda item? Not just good for the group, because of course, it's in a group, pretty much you want to know what the prompt is or what phase you're in when it gets to your turn. But it also informs things like note taking. If you know it's just a report, then you can just write in the report and you don't have to ask the questions, because hopefully those will get explained in the moment. If it's exploring an issue, maybe you want to write down as much as you can, you know, sort of in a brainstorm fashion, hoping that someone will later synthesize it because it's not a decision, and move forward the important parts. And with a decision, for example, you want to make really clear, either as facilitator or note taker, which of everything that's on the minutes is the actual proposal on the table that the group is being asked to consent or to object to. Can we go to the next slide, please? So remember, I know that this is a lot of text. I don't bother reading at all. I don't expect you to. But remember, we said a 3-step process and it's fractal. So each one of the steps of the 3-step process can have its own 3-step process. This is kind of an attempt at that. So in a full policy making process, if you read just the left-hand column, there's one part of understanding the context, one of generating a proposal, and then one last one of making the decision or accepting the proposal. And depending on how complex the issue is, you could take as much or as little time in each one of these steps. You know, so oftentimes understanding the context is self-evident simply because you're a group of people who work together and know each other and you know what the context is. So maybe that phase is, you know, self-explanatory or just with how it's stated. But maybe sometimes it does require, you know, taking a step back and saying like, okay, what are we thinking about here? What is the issue that we're trying to solve? What is our policy or proposal or the agenda item really about? And so in order to make this less overwhelming, this full chart with all the 3 steps, with each having their own 3 steps, why don't we go in order? And we start with the very top one, which is the consent process that some of you already know. And then we're going to look at the second one, which is the how to generate a proposal. And then lastly, the bottom one, which is the understanding the context. Can you think it around? Also, I'm noticing my internet get kind of slow. So if I don't see you, like, please just unmute and interrupt me, whether it's to say something or because you want to ask a question or whether I'm not clear, please do, or put it in the chat. The consent process, understand, explore, decide, are ones that I've basically already seen, you know, the YPC circles that I've participated in, already put into practice. The understanding phase is presenting the proposal and the facilitator asking, are there any clarifying questions? Then the explore phase being, okay, let's do quick reactions. That's where you can give your opinion on how you like the proposal, how it makes you feel, etc. And lastly, on the decide, the consent round. Okay, do we have consent to this? Would anyone object? The decision, I guess for this part as a facilitator, key tip, the decide phase doesn't always actually have to result in consenting to a proposal. I know that oftentimes that is the golden aim and what we're aiming for. And as a facilitator, for me at least, there's a little bit of an ego of like, yes, can I push the group all the way to a consent decision? But oftentimes the decision or the last step can be saying, you know what, we're not ready for this. Let's have someone rework on the wording of the proposal. Let's just sit on it and see how it feels next meeting. Let's gather more information. Maybe we don't have enough input, you know, like let's ask others who will be more affected by the decision. So the decision oftentimes is just a synthesis phase, you know, the summary or the next steps of the group's feeling on this. Key tip, doesn't always have to result in a consent decision. Next one, please, Deborah. Or maybe one too much. Can I see the previous one? I think this is just the consent process as I explained it, just in reverse order, top to bottom or bottom to top. Answer the questions one by one. And then in the consent round, if there are objections, the dealing with objections could take place in a 3-step process in and of its own. So now can we actually see the next one, Deborah? if someone in a circle presents an objection, right, the very first thing for the facilitator and for the group to do is understanding the concern or underlying need, which again, depending on context, depending on how emotional it is, maybe it takes some time, maybe it takes a full round of asking questions of like, hey, how are you really feeling about this? What's really at stake for you in this objection or in this decision and so on. And I think this is the key part, honestly, for making it like a wholesome, healthy, emotionally safe process, like getting to the point where we say, okay, yes, we hear you. Like now I understand both how you're feeling and the need at hand. Because oftentimes it seems like the conflict may be just about the proposal. And if we center just on the proposal and just on the organizational and doing side of things, we may look over the just as important relational, emotional aspect of things. And then once it's understood, exploring potential solutions to address the concern, which the three standard ones that I have, obviously way context dependent, is amending the proposal, so just changing it, which some changes can generate objections on the other hand, depending on how touchy the subject is. The other one is to just shorten the term, saying, okay, if we're scared, if the objection lies on we're scared on not knowing what the result of this will be, why don't we try it out for an amount of time that feels safe enough to try, good enough for now and safe enough to try, which is somewhat of a facilitator's motto. We're not aiming for the best, just good enough for now and safe enough to try. Sort of following the idea of failing fast, failing often, failing safe. And lastly, placing an indicator, which is not always the easy or evident how to, but saying, okay, if the concern is around, our website not getting too many click rates, then let's keep track of how many people are logging into the website. And then next time when we review the proposal in the next evaluation cycle, we'll have important input on whether this is actually meeting the needs that we think we are or not. And sort of having that fresh data or that, experience-based data is way more meaningful than maybe sometimes our concerns before trying things out, which are oftentimes speculative, right? With totally valid, but oftentimes speculative, and we can sort of base it a little bit on empiricism or experience. And then lastly, deciding on the new amended proposal, which usually takes, depending on how long it took and how complex and how much amendment there was to the proposal, can also take its own 3 steps of understanding, exploring, deciding. I notice I'm talking a lot and talking fast, so are there questions this far? Okay. I trust that if anything is not clear, either because of the content or because of how fast I speak or anything, you will please let me know. Can we see the next slide, Deborah, please? One back, actually, the big one. That one, yeah, the making policy one. So we just covered basically the top one out of the 3, right? The making the decision. And now I'd like us to focus on the middle one, which is the actually generating the proposal. It's easy to just make the decision when the proposal is already brought, right? As a facilitator, if somebody brings the proposal, then all you have to do is run the 3 steps. Ask the questions or ask people to ask the questions, hear the quick reactions, and look for consent. But if the aim is to generate a proposal, that actually takes a little bit more engaging with a group and is not always as simple as just running the 3 steps. Can we go to the next one, please? Again, it follows the 3 same patterns, and I'm going to get tired of saying it, but that's kind of the point. It seemed like, wow, it's so abstract that it applies to most anything. Understanding is a part that we call picture forming or gathering dimensions or considerations. And I can speak to more detail on that, but it's basically saying, okay, what do we need to consider in order to make a good decision about this? Or rather, what elements absolutely need to be there on the proposal? They're oftentimes framed as questions. So for example, in the case of, a community that people live in, and the issue is, talking about a policy on dogs, the dimension can be something around, do dogs have to wear a leash, or can they just go around like that? It's not stating, I think dogs should wear a leash. It's not, getting to that point. It's like, question mark, like leash, that's probably something that needs to get covered in the proposal, right? Or time considerations, how long is the policy going to be in effect? Things like that. It's a step back. It's before saying, I think we should do this. It's saying, I really think we should think about this when trying to answer the question. Then the exploration part is the one that we all love, because it's where we get to, brainstorm ideas together. And it's the idea is that it be a most generative phase as possible. So you want to free flow with a brainstorm. You can have, half-baked ideas. Ideas can contradict each other. They can build on each other. It can be amorphous, we want to get the ideas, as many ideas out there on paper as possible. And then later, the decide part is the synthesis part, which is often the hardest, which is, okay, from that big list of different ideas of potential solutions, how do we put it into one sound proposal that is coherent and makes sense? That's the part where it really takes, fine tuning to harmonize the voices of the group. So let me look at time. I want us to do a practice exercise, and I think it's a good investment of our time. So could we go to the next slide, Deborah, please? I'd like us to generate a proposal here, like do a little bit of practice and basically follow the 3 steps that I just mentioned of dimensions, ideas, and synthesis. So if the previous slide, what I explained in it wasn't clear, now is the time to speak before we actually jump in and actually try to do it. Burning questions for understanding anyone has? Okay, I see none. In this case, Deborah, I did not think of this earlier on who would facilitate this part, but I'm going to put it on the table. Do you want to take a crack at it, Deborah, and practice? Or you want me to just go?
I can go either way. I sort of lean towards you just because with this particular thing, I have such strong opinions that I might not be the best facilitator and want to be just one of many voices in the circle.
Great. And I should have thought of this earlier, of the possibility of someone else facilitating. I should have thought of earlier and been planning it out. But I'll do it. The idea is, let's generate a proposal on what should or could YPC's main focus be for the coming future and what to prioritize. So in order to have, I put there in the slide as Deborah is showing us the 3 steps, which are the dimensions, the ideas, and the synthesized proposal. Does anybody, and I'm just going to do a round, what are some dimensions that we would have to cover in order for this to be a sound proposal? Michael, you want to go first?
There we go. Sorry, looking for unmute. So how long in the future?
Great question. Carlene, you have any dimensions you want to add?
Can you come back to me? I have a little bit of problems to figuring out dimensions.
Of course, I can come back to you. And as always, also both Sociocracy practitioner and facilitator's best friend is passing. No obligation ever to add anything if there's nothing to add. And similarly, dimensions, the list of dimensions does not have to be as thorough as the ideas. It's just like making sure we don't miss anything important. And just for the sake of time, I'm gonna give each of us who has a turn just like one chance to put an idea out there to avoid double dipping, and so that we don't take the rest of the session on this. Annette, if you're there, do you have any dimensions you want to share?
Not right now.
Selena?
Can you hear me? I'm sorry. I always need to ask. I've been having a lot of issues. You can hear me clearly?
I actually kind of missed what you said, but just because of the sound.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. So how long in the future? And I think how can we communicate with that count? Like, how can we communicate? Like methods of communication.
Awesome. So if I heard you right, how to communicate the decision?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Thank you. William?
We can only give one dimension or one question.
Unless you're like really sitting on two really hot ones, I won't censor it. It was just for
I have two I
timekeeping.
want to give, but
Please do.
How much money will we have? And how many members will we have?
Can I play a tough facilitator and also try to aid Deborah in the notes and just put it as capacity ? And then have both like those include each other? William, do you feel like that honors your question?
Yes.
Cool. Khadija, do you have any dimensions you want to add?
No, I don't.
Cool. Ellie, also, hey, how are you doing? Ellie, are you there?
Ellie just vocalized in the chat that, oh, you see?
I don't see, sorry, I can only participate via chat right now. Cool. If you have any dimensions that you want us to add, please put them in the chat, Ellie. Stacy, dimensions you want to add?
Sure. What collective impact do we hope to have?
Nice. I'm gonna give myself a turn in the round and ask and out myself as being not contextualized, but what was it last time? If we're wanting to switch gears, if we're wanting to go in the same line, if there's a progression. Deborah, have you had a turn?
What are we not doing? I think that's dimension.
And at this point, I'm just going to invite if anyone else has a dimension they want to add to make sure this list is complete, please do. All right. And if, further down the line in the process, we find ourselves that there's a dimension we missed, we can always go back and add it. Alrighty, second step, exploration ideas. Now is the time where we could, take possible solutions of actually answer the question. What do we think, or what is our opinion on what should YPC's main focus and priorities be in the coming future? Stacy, you want to go and then pass it to someone?
Sure, and I'll also say, I was going to put this in the chat, but I have to run after this. I don't know a lot about what YPC does. I'm just getting to know the organization, but from what I understand, I really appreciate the different spaces and ways that giving youth collaborative voice. So I think the idea might be to, in multiple settings, bringing, helping lots of organizations make space for youth voices, especially any that are, working with, youth or impacting youth. So I think of like other nonprofits and schools and any organization or vendor that's supporting them. So thank you. Thank you all for having me, and look forward to connecting hopefully at another time. Bye.
Thank you for your time. Bye-bye.
I think.
Hey, Carlene, you want to go? Ideas?
I think maybe from like an organization perspective, an idea could be like how we kind of structure our organization for onboarding new youth to keep what YPC does going. Yeah.
Khadija, do you want to add any?
Oh yeah, I was kind of just gonna echo the whole making space for youth voices. But yeah.
Michael?
I didn't realize I had strong opinions. Growing, I'm going to say growing growing distributive leadership amongst youth, New York City youth. That's mine.
Thank you. Annette, do you have any ideas you want to add on what to focus on as YPC in the coming future?
Definitely echo what everyone said, and just like it being a space where youth can collaborate and like build on each other's like leadership, and like having us teach each other our skills. And workshops like this are also really helpful in like learning like things that we wouldn't like, I don't know, like here in other places, I guess.
I'm gonna give myself a turn in the round so that I don't go last. I'm gonna say, very biased, solidifying the sociocratic implementation. And I'm gonna double dip, and where it says structure for onboarding new youth, maybe it's a sub point of that, but it including training around governance, training on sociocratic governance and how to perform roles like facilitation and so on. Selena, do you want to add any?
Promoting opportunities for like youth to actually like know more about it.
And William, do you have any you want to add?
This is going to be very biased, but from an advocacy standpoint, more youth power in our systems, which means lowering the voting age.
And Ellie, do you want to add one in the chat if you have any? Pass. Cool. So I think all of us went at least once, and I recognize that we could, continue. This is, like I said, the exploration phase is the most open-ended one. So you would do basically round after round until everyone has passed, and we feel that the list is complete. And what we would traditionally do is compare a list of ideas and contrast it with the list of dimensions and seeing, does every dimension have at least one idea that responds to it or that addresses it? And I think in our case, it's easy to notice right away that it's not so much the case, because the one of how long in the future, I don't think any of the ideas mention anything about, how long we're projecting in time. But I am ambivalent on how to go about this. I'm actually not going to push us to meet every dimension, just so that we make sure we cover all the bits of the exercise instead of focusing just on this exploration part, making this thorough. And since Michael put in the chat on ideas on synthesis, that is oftentimes the hardest part, right? Because it's very easy to get in the generative state and to throw out the proposals, but then how do we make them fit together with each other is often a challenge. I will say this, since Michael put what are some tips. My main tip is don't do it right away and don't do it in the meeting. Usually, the main synthesis that I tend to when facilitating is saying, okay, we have the ideas or the harvest, so to speak. Why don't we assign someone or empower someone who feels inspiration or attachment or clarity on the topic and on the issue and with the ideas, to take it home, to synthesize it, and to bring something back to the group and see it, look at it differently and with different eyes. However, why don't we try something here? Does someone in the group reading this set of ideas feel like they could take an attempt at synthesizing them, harmonizing them into one proposal?
I can go for it.
Yay! Do you wanna do it on the spot, or do you want us to take like 2 minutes?
No, I can do it on the spot. And I would use the Google Doc because it's easier, but my particular tip for synthesis is to find how things connect. So for example, I see one connection around leadership and membership. And then I see another one about just youth power. So helping organizations make space for youth voices, lowering the voting age, and then, So I think, sort of like external youth power and then leadership and membership I put also promoting Youth Power Coalition there as well, because we need to promote Youth Power Coalition in order to then get new people, structure for onboarding so that they come in. Part of onboarding has to be training on governance. So those are the major themes that I see right now from a synthesis perspective.
Cool. So for the purpose of the exercise, right? Maybe we would say on the proposal on the table is that the focus for YPC over the next year be on leadership and membership for building youth power, or something along those lines. Is what I would, if I were facilitating this and our final aim for this session really was to come to a decision on this or a proposal on it, I'd put something like that on the table. I am looking and thinking of time. And Deborah, since we sort of put together this exercise, how far do you want to take it? Is this good enough for now? Do you want us to spend more time on it? Do you want us to actually assign someone somewhere for this list to go to be used as input? Maybe a circle can take it just as input.
My proposal is that we continue forward, or we have some time to ask if there are any other questions, and then we continue forward. This information, I can take responsibility for making sure either our mission circle or our general circle looks into it.
Cool. And you want questions about this topic, i.e. the future of YPC, or questions on the process for proposal generation?
For process. So for example, some questions or noticings. So for example, I noticed you asked what was the last time under dimensions, and I realized that that's actually part of the understanding phase of proposal generation, right? What is all the context surrounding the, I think, like what's all the context surrounding trying to figure out what I should connect on.
So what I'm hearing is, the actual list and content and future of YPC, you can take it. Hopefully it'll be decided on in some other circle sometime. And right now we can do a little debrief of the exercise.
Yes.
Awesome. So how was it? How was it for you? Maybe Carlene, do you want to go?
I think this activity was interesting. It definitely helps with facilitating in the future and having to synthesize and create proposals. I think that it was slightly overwhelming just because of how many dimensions and ideas there are to synthesize. But overall, I think it's good.
Thank you. Michael, how was it?
Even though it was pretend, it felt very real because this is kind of what we do often, and this is what happens often. One thing I thought about today, though, that hasn't struck me in a while is that perhaps there's a pre-meeting or prep meeting to at least get aligned on the dimensions, because maybe we don't want to harvest dimensions in real time. But perhaps it's thinking about the first session, is it efficient if at least the dimensions are aligned and people come into the meeting aligned on the dimensions? That might also help with the ideas harvest, but that's what I got.
Cool. Any other debrief, reactions, impressions, or if you're sitting on questions, something was left confusing or not? Khadija?
Yeah, I just felt like it gave me a better insight. But yeah, it was different. I never did something like that before. But that's all I have to contribute right now.
Annette?
Yeah, I feel like it was definitely a new way of thinking about the structure, and it was really interesting. I think dimensions took me a little bit longer to get than ideas. And still now I'm you know, how many things can like be incorporated under dimension. And yeah.
Selena?
Like being part of several organizations and facilitating some workshops myself, I feel like this is similar to those, and it just keeps everything organized and allows everyone to have a chance to speak. So I liked it.
William?
Similar to what everyone else said, it was very informative and definitely a very new way, because I would have never thought about dimensions or ideas. And this is similar to what Carlene said. It was a little overwhelming at some points, especially. I do have to be honest and say that I was a little bit distracted doing other things during this training. And at one point, I remember I saw like jumping jacks, so like rubbing something with a cushion earlier in the training. I don't exactly remember, but yeah, I do think that I would know more about what's going on, but if I was less distracted by other things.
In the chat, if you're, debrief impressions, if you're sitting on a doubt or question on the process, please do. I'm going to take some time to respond to some of what y'all mentioned on dimensions. One, definitely, yes, got lost in the how much play pretender what it was or wasn't, especially with the meta aspect of like, oh, how do we move now process-wise? Like, do we just leave this halfway through, or do we move forward with the training as planned? The other one is, yes, dimensions are always one of the trickier like aspects of facilitation to convey, because especially in a case like today, if you see like the prompt at the top that says, let's generate a proposal for, what should YPC's main focus and priority be in the coming future? That's already a question. And the question is what you bring to the group. And of course, you read the question, you read the prompt, you already want to answer it, right? Like your mind automatically goes there, but it's like, hold on a minute, I have to take a step back and ask questions about the question. And so it has a level of abstraction. But once everybody in the group is familiar with it, and it gets normalized, and you realize that they don't know, it doesn't always have to be the most thorough list. Then it makes things easier down the road. My Zoom is being whack on me. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Can we now go to the next slide, please? So we did an explanation of the top one, making the decision consent process. Many of you are already familiar with it. Then we just did an exercise of generating a proposal. And actually part of what made it challenging and overwhelming, like some of you said or hinted at, was that I didn't really bring anything ready for the group. I only brought open questions, right? Open-ended questions without really something already like pre-digested to sort of like suggest a pathway for us to go into. And that's where depending on how complex or broad scope something is, it may even need a previous step of understanding the context and doing a whole 3-step process for saying, okay, this is the issue that we're trying to get at, right? And oftentimes it looks in the form of a need statement or the prompt. Today I brought the prompt as an open question, but maybe oftentimes the prompt for the proposal comes in the form of a need statement saying the organization or the circle needs this. And we can do a whole, understand, explore, decide questions, explore the underlying need, and coming to a synthesized statement of like, okay, this is the need that we're trying to meet with this policy. And as I said, fractal, so every step can be divided into another 3-step process if needed. Of course, you can skip them when it's evident and you feel like the group has enough clarity to just skip on to the next one. But if you find yourself taking time, you know, for example, when the very first question of our dimensions today was, ooh, what time frame are we thinking? That could be a topic on its own. You know, how does YPC iterate its time planning processes, right? It's what's it called? Its cycles. How long are they? It's breathing cycles, so to speak. Can we go to the next slide, please? And also, at this point, my screen is totally whack. So if I lose track of time, just let me know when we can close. We have like 10 minutes left, yeah?
Yes, 10 minutes.
I'm gonna do these last few parts quick. I hope I don't sacrifice clarity, but I'll see it as an investment in more of a thorough debrief and closing together. Are you seeing the selection process slide? Yes, selection process basically follows the three same processes, right? One is understanding the role. The other one in nominations is exploring who could fill it. And then lastly, proposing a candidate and doing the same old consent round. If the next board meeting at the end of this month should have an interesting selection process that I'll be there to accompany. So maybe we can talk more detail then, and hopefully it'll be recorded. Next one, please. Are you seeing the performance review slide?
Yes. Are you not being able to see the slides? Because then I can tell you immediately when it switches.
Yeah, I'm not being able to see the slides. I'm still on the selection process one, but I think I have a guess of what that one says. Yes, performance review, same pattern, understand, explore, decide. Performance review is what we do usually when somebody is performing a operational role or circle role. It doesn't necessarily have to be that, but it's usually when it happens. And we review the role, both the role itself and the person performing it. So, you know, how did Eric do as a trainer in this session? And there's an understanding phase of if it's relevant to review role descriptions and to do a round saying what worked well. And in performance reviews, the round starts with a focused person and ends with a focused person. So in this case, I would say, yeah, you know, as a trainer, I think I did really solid with my time management, but I honestly, you know, could have put more energy into my slides. And then there's a moment of hearing everybody say what worked well and what could have been different. And it's usually a super connecting, super enriching process, like, yeah, interpersonal connection gets really, I don't know, enlivened or highlighted in those moments. Then to explore, talking about potential improvement areas, sort of trying to synthesize the different worked well and could be different rounds. And then ideas for improvement, and then writing an improvement plan. And oftentimes it can be very personal. It can be, you know, directly onto the roles, and then what we refine is the role descriptions in as much as they are, you know, policies. But it can also be something as personal to, you know what, I commit to journaling every day, or I commit to saying thank you every day. You know, it's really context dependent and super personal, and that's really where the personal and the work or institutional really blends together super neatly, and we see the two energies in sociocracy really finding themselves in a sweet place. And then lastly, the deciding is consenting to an improvement plan, which I think is a really important part of, you know, you're committing in front of your peers to doing this differently for your own good and also for the satisfaction of needs of the organization, the group, your peers, yourself, and yourselves and each other in community. So I will have one. I will have a performance review where I will be reviewed as a Sociocracy consultant. And Deborah, do you have the date handy? I want to say July 6th.
I'll check right now. Yes, it is July 6th.
I have one coming July 6th, and each and every one of you is invited. Of course, if you're interested, please say so, and I can invite you, message me via Slack or send me an email or say it on the chat. And I'll invite you to the calendar event, and we'll be doing this with myself in case you want to see one live. I'm gonna skip all the slides, and I just want us to talk and basically say, you know, how I saw this sitting with you. What are you taking from it? What are you learning? And I'll share that if you're interested in seeing the rest of the slides, please do some other time, but I think we'll get more juice out of our time together if we talk about it than just reading the information off a purpose slideshow. So, how are you sitting with all this? What are you learning? What are you taking? How's it landing on you? Carlene, you want to go?
I'm sorry, can you repeat what we're discussing right now?
Can you hear me? Yes. Just a debrief of this whole session. What are we learning?
Oh no, I think Eric's internet definitely is not supporting them. I will, in lieu of, as Eric tries to come back. Yay, okay. Hello. Nothing happened in between. Go for it.
Awesome. Yeah, no, just before closing, I wanted to debrief. What are we learning from this? Did I say Carlene?
Yeah, okay. So overall, I think that today's session was super useful. And it definitely felt a lot shorter than other times. So I definitely like the shortened time. And I learned a lot of helpful things that can help from a facilitator's standpoint, like synthesis and the proposal process and things like that.
Khadija?
Hi, yeah, I think that it gave me like a new perspective on like kind of like how to bring these topics up in mind. Because I don't know, like I feel like sometimes I really don't know what it is exactly to do, but like this just gave me like a better understanding of how to approach things.
Annette, how is this? How are you sitting with this? What are you taking from this?
Definitely echo what was said. I think I'm still like processing like the language of it all, if that makes sense, and like how like I could use the language when I'm stepping into other spaces and trying to make it sense to like other people. But I think like just having it being laid out, like the meeting structure and like the steps was like really helpful, but definitely still processing.
Ellie shared something in the chat. I unfortunately missed some of the training, but really appreciated the dimensions and ideas piece as a sort of a way to do brainstorming. Cool. William, what are you taking from this?
I'm definitely taking away that idea of dimensions and ideas, especially when it comes to the advocacy element of when we possibly come up with new campaign ideas and new ways we can advocate for youth power. So definitely zeroing on what Annette said in the chat, questions about questions and questions about our campaigns.
Selena?
Alongside everyone else, it is like the terms used for this like you could say a meeting was different from like what I'm usually hearing. So yeah, the new terms was nice to learn, but I need time to like also think about it.
Michael, if you're there, so maybe, did you go parenting? You're here?
I will, but I'm here. Oh, yeah, I'm here for a second. That slide with the proposal, making a proposal, and it's the stones. That was illuminating for me. I bring a lot of bias to these things, either from too many trainings about how to facilitate and lead and design to my own personal ones. And anyway, the idea that like it's a process for people to come to clarity and to alignment. I know it, but to see the sociocracy process as many times as I've seen it the last year and a half, something about today brought me to this is how people get clear and aligned. Like, oh, okay. I went I went beyond the harvest.
Deborah, you want to share? What are you taking?
Yeah, three things actually. So one is I hear everyone on the terms, and I'm thinking maybe we just need to, as facilitators at Youth Power Coalition, continuously go back to this framework and say, all right, now we're on the proposal shaping side, or now we're doing picture forming, which means blank. And that will be training in sociocracy in these like little steps. Another is, I think a lot about why I'm so excited about understanding, explore, decide as a framework is, and breaking it out into such small pieces, is I think it allows everyone to be a leader. Because sometimes when there's a decision that seems really big, a single person might not know where to start, but if they know, oh, like I can take this to an agenda, to a meeting and just start the process in this one space, that'd be cool. And then the third thing that was brought up is that slow piece of it. I think dimension shaping and understanding is so important, because too often I have seen people with more privilege come in and say, I have a brilliant idea, give me all the money or give me all the time. And it just kind of sucks the power out. It just, I'm like, what are you doing? You need to understand what's happening first and really prioritize and honor the work that's on the ground and led by people most impacted.
Awesome. Myself, I have something to say that's really half-baked, but was just prompted by what Deborah said, of like, so much in the consensus tradition, everything is a proposal, every suggestion is a proposal. And what I like about sociocratic facilitation is, naming it a proposal and treating it as a proposal commits the facilitator in the group to a very specific process of the understand, explore, decide. And not everything needs to be a proposal, right? And there's all the previous work that goes into bringing a proposal that is good enough and ready to bring to a consent process takes so much of massaging the problem and the ideas and the different feelings and the different needs that are a part of it. And that's really where a lot of the work comes in, right? And where as a group, it's like one feels so grateful for oh, thank you, for massaging the proposal outside of the meeting and bringing it so pre-digested so that all we have to do is, decide on it without having to really grapple with the issue in this specific meeting. I recognize we're at the scheduled time, so if you have to leave, please do so. If you don't have to run, I invite us to do a closing and just say how we're leaving this meeting and say goodbye. Selena, you want to go first?
So, hi again, my name is Selena. I really enjoyed this meeting, even though I did join quite late. You might at 6, but the information was a lot nonetheless, and I did learn a lot. So I'm feeling good about that, and I'm glad to be here and meet everyone. So thank you.
Ellie, do you have closing words you want to share?
Yeah, sorry, I'm able to unmute now. I really appreciate this training, and I, like Selena, was only able to be here for a short amount of time, but I feel like I learned a lot about dimensions particularly, and so thank you for sharing all that information.
Annette, how are you leaving?
I'm feeling good, and just with a lot to process, but not in an overwhelming sense, if that makes sense.
I'll give myself a turn in the checkout. It was so hard to make this all fit in 90 minutes. And even though I tried very hard, I didn't manage it. And I felt so proud of my time management skills in the last 2 ones that I really feel like, oh, why don't on the very last one did I have to miss? There's some other, I guess, resources / materials that I wanted to share. One is called the Facilitator's Cheat Sheet. And it's really super helpful. It has all of this information, and what I do and what the other people that I learned facilitation from do is they print it and they laminate it and they take it everywhere. Like whoever taught me facilitation once said, like I always bring with me, like, my wallet, my keys, diapers, and my facilitation cheat sheet. So I'll probably do like a follow-up post sharing the slideshow so that you can see the missing slides, which aren't too essential. And then the reference it has, which is the facilitator's cheat sheet, which I strongly encourage using. And if you want to, change the language to have your own YPC one, you can take it, because the patterns I think are the essential ones, which is the 3-step pattern. Just edit it to have the words or the language that you want to use. But I enjoyed, this was fun. I honestly gotta say, kind of sad that it comes to an end. Kind of sad with my computer connection. It doesn't allow me to see the same slide as y'all and so on. So that's kind of disconnecting. It doesn't make me feel like I'm in the trainer zone, so to speak, but I definitely had fun, and I hope to see y'all in some of the meetings to come. Khadija, do you want to share some checkout words? How are you leaving?
I'm leaving with a lot of gratitude and insight. And yeah, I am also kind of sad that it's gonna end, but happy that to refresh ourselves and come back with like a new mindset and new goals and new things to like actually put into action.
Carlene?
I'm leaving today's space with the new understanding on sociocracy and how to apply it to everyday, I guess, things that go on at YPC, like when it comes to facilitating meetings or creating proposals. I definitely have like a new understanding of how to do all of that. And I think this is a really great series of trainings. And I'm glad that I attended all of them and got to gain as much knowledge as I did. So thank you, Eric.
Deborah?
I realize I have to go back to this facilitation cheat sheet and start using the language. So that was really great. Thank you.
Michael, how are you leaving?
This was a good refresher. +1 to what Deborah said about the facilitation. I haven't looked at it probably since we was in Panera Bread, like November 2019. So, or maybe when I handed it off to Carlene. So whenever that was around that time. So I haven't looked at the cheat sheet in a while. I thought the session itself was really good, Eric. I think your slides really map the process of understanding very well. Like the making proposal stones, how those go together. I think your slides unpack how people come to understand and align. So I like that it modeled each other. I like the scaffolding. So I really appreciated that intentionality.
Nice, thank you. I gotta say, I cannot take credit for the slides. They're all Sofa's pre-made, and you're free to share them and edit them as long as you credit Sofa and use the same Creative Commons license, which is stamped on the slides themselves. So, so no, you can take the credit, or not the credit, but you can use them and then give the credit. All right. Thank you so much, friends. See you on the other side. Goodbye.